Good morning, and thank you for joining us on this post Mother's Day Monday. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers joining us this morning. I am Marshette Turner, Director of the Houston Minority Business Development Agency, and I'm excited about what my MBDA Amplified team is doing. Today, we will take you through the process of responding to an RFX and exactly what that is. So you certainly want to be engaged and involved for this webinar. As I stated on this platform before, this 10-week Small Business Academy is twofold. First, we want to start you or give you information on small and startup businesses with a one-on-one business training and coaching that you'll need to further grow and develop your business. And then secondly, we want to help you get to the place where you're obtaining government contracts, which have proven to be very lucrative for firms who are or who were exactly where you are at this current state. Please be reminded that this webinar series will be recorded and you can view it on our YouTube channel within 24 hours of today's webinar. After my team presents this morning, we'll open it up for Q&A, at which time you can ask the questions that you have. You can type them in the chat and we will ask our trainers the questions that you have. With that, I'd certainly like to acknowledge my team on today's call, and they are Ms. Jessica Vasquez, our program coordinator, Ms. Tanya McGilbra, our business advisor, Ms. Diedra Sutton, another business advisor, and of course, our presenters for this series, Ms. Joni Hall and Mr. Austin Tenette. Before I turn it over to Ms. Hall, let me remind you, or in some cases, inform you about our Salute to Minorities in Construction luncheon. This luncheon will take place on Tuesday, June 13th at the Junior League of Houston. We would love for you all to join us and be a part of this fabulous and engaging and informative luncheon. We honor minority businesses and the folks who support them during this time. So we hope that you will scan the QR code, go to our website, give us a call, shoot us an email, whatever it is you need to do to be a part of our Salute luncheon on Tuesday, June 13th. The information is on our screen, so please, please, please make sure that you are engaging with us so that you can continue to be up to date on what the Houston Minority Business Development Agency is doing, because certainly it's a lot. So, salute to minorities in construction. Don't miss it. Let me now turn it over to Ms. Joni Hall, who will facilitate, along with Mr. Austin Tenette, this series. Ms. Hall, take it away.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this marvelous Monday. Thank you, Director Turner, for reiterating the reason and the purpose for what we're here for today and for the following weeks to complete this academy. We will discuss about office hours at the end, so you can jot those down. If you've had the privilege to have office hours with myself and Mr. Tenette before, we're waiting for your responses to the assignments that we gave you or feedback. We always want to hear feedback, positive or negative, or where we can jump in and keep helping you elevate your business. So without further ado, just to let you know a little bit more about myself, I do help with networking with small businesses, provide training on creating a winning capability statement, which you can find, as was referenced out there on our YouTube channel, in reference to 2 of those that we've done, and business matchmaker by partnering clients with established strategic partners. So again, make sure you jot those questions down so we can facilitate and answer those at the end. Mr. Tenette?
Thank you very much, Ms. Hall. Appreciate that. And I'll be your primary presenter today. I'm Austin Tenette, also an MBDA business advisor. I do a lot of work with the Houston Community College, their Center for Entrepreneurship, where we've enabled thousands of small business owners, much like yourselves, to reach that next level of exceptional performance. So next slide, please. So as we just a little bit about some of the goals for MBDA Amplified. Was mentioned briefly before, but we're really here as a resource to the startup business community to help you folks along your way, and more specifically focused on the government contracting space as a way to create thriving in entrepreneurial enterprises. Next slide, please. And so here's our flyer that many of you probably have responded to, but on this particular flyer, it lays out the various program workshops that we'll be having. As Ms. Hall stated earlier, we're about a little over halfway through our series, and we have a few more left to go, and which was going to provide, again, a great general background and foundation for those of you who are interested in contracting with whether it be local, state, or federal government entities. Next slide, please. So our chat for today is going to be responding to an RFX, and you'll see on the next slide what that X means. But for those of you who've been through been with us through all the workshops, this is really the payoff moment, what we're going to deliver here, because you've done all sorts of foundational work, building your capability statement, making some decisions about what agencies or what part of the government you'd like to participate in as it relates to offering your products and services. And now we're going to, in our talk today, we're going to talk about how you take sort of those ideas, concepts, and some of that foundational work that you've done, and how you bring it together to present your offer to the one of the agencies. So the reason we use RFX is because soliciting agencies will use a variety of terms. So you'll see a request for quote for RFQ or request for quotation. That's usually when there's this. They're looking for some specific information about a procurement that the agency is about to inform the community about. And then sometimes it's also used for smaller procurements. Think under $150,000 and that sort of thing. The next one is probably the most used solicitation, and that's the RFP, or request for proposal. And this one typically doesn't have any sort of dollar limits associated with it. If you go up to tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars for that particular for that solicitation. These tend to be very, very thorough and exhaustive. And you could, if it's a large dollar RFP, you can count on spending weeks, maybe if not months, preparing your requests. The IFB, or invitation for bid, those are sealed bids, typically more commodity type products where all the providers are pretty much the same, and what the contracting entity is looking for is just the lowest qualified price for that particular service. And then the last one is RFI, or request for information. And this is oftentimes used when, say, a contracting officer, maybe he or she is soliciting help for, maybe it's a first time for the agency, or maybe it's one of those areas where they don't have a lot of information. So they'll reach out to the providers in that particular space just to get some foundational information so that the contracting office can help to formulate a solicitation to issue that may come out in the form of an RFQ or an RFP at some future point. So I share this with you because because clarity is something that's absolutely mission critical in the world of government contracting. So we always want to be aware of what it is that we are responding to or desire to respond to. So that's why we spend a little time on the different types of solicitations. Next slide, please. So I'm a big proponent of preparing for the journey, and so for those of you who've been with us through the entire series, or have taken the opportunity to review missed workshops via the YouTube channel, all of those things that we've talked about before, they all come together as we assemble our response to the RFX. So at a minimum, we need you to make sure that you're registered for the agency that you endeavor to do business with. And probably, since you would have received the solicitation, that probably is a good indicator that you are registered. The capability statement that you had prepared earlier in this series is going to be absolutely mission critical to your success in responding to the solicitation, because so many of the things that you have included on your capability statement, they will come to bear when you prepare to respond to the solicitation. Now, I will warn you, probably since the capability statement was done in a more condensed format, this will be the opportunity to take those condensed statements and references and expound upon them for purposes of responding to the particular solicitation. Make sure well, at this point, you have to make some determination. Are you going to be responding as a prime or as a subcontractor? And of course, once you read through the solicitation, it should be abundantly clear where you are best positioned to participate in a winning bid as either sub or a prime. The government is a pretty particularly federal government, very transparent organization. So as you prepare to respond, you have the opportunity to go back and review past solicitations in this particular area, and oftentimes they will also provide you what a previous winning bid looked like, so you can sort of understand what a winning bid looks like, how some thoughts and ideas on how to price your particular proposal, and some related things to that nature. And then, of course, since since the bulk of us on this call today are small business enterprises, this is also a good time to, as you review the solicitation, to make sure that to understand that what the small business goals are for the particular agency that you endeavor to work with. Next slide, please. Okay, so we've got about 7 or 8 kind of key steps we want to walk through as it relates to what does it take to create an effective response to these solicitations. So the number one thing is to read and understand the RFP. I've talked to a number of people who have deep expertise with responding to government contract RFPs, and what they'll often share is that before they even pick up a pen and a piece of paper to begin their response, they'll read that solicitation 2 to 3 times just to make sure that they have extreme clarity as to what the solicitation is looking for and asking for. Because within that, in those RFPs, it's very important to pay close attention to what the instructions and requirements are, what the evaluation criteria. In fact, I had a contracting officer tell me, she said that since oftentimes they get so many responses, that if the instructions were to use 12-point font in your response and somebody used an 8-point or something other than a 12-point font, that was a way to disqualify them. So we don't want that to be used. So just pay lots of attention to specifically what they're asking for. And then, of course, in terms of understanding, make sure you understand what problems that the agency is trying to resolve via this solicitation. Oftentimes, and I see this with many business owners, where we fall in love with our product, our service offering, and all we want to talk about is how great we are. And sometimes we miss the opportunity to create a customized solution for the targeted client. And so let that not be us or you, and make sure that we understand what problem it is we're trying to solve on behalf of the agency. Understand the scope of the project. My grandmother used to tell me that sometimes my eyes were bigger than my stomach, and I would eat way more than I could handle. And such is the case here. Sometimes we'll see a solicitation, and we think, boy, I could do all of that, but maybe it might be beyond what you're currently capable of delivering. So it might be best to rethink your response, or think of maybe becoming a subcontractor as opposed to approaching it as the prime. What are the goals of the agency? There's a variety of goals: business goals, strategic goals on how they incorporate small businesses, businesses with certifications, minority businesses, underserved businesses, underutilized businesses into their agency. So make sure that you're clear on that. So when it comes time to respond, you can speak specifically to the goals that they're trying to achieve and how well you match up with what it is they're trying to do. And then, of course, constraints and considerations. This is really, really important to help you with your decision-making process as to whether or not this is the type of a solicitation that you want to respond to. Because, for example, and I know we see my MBDA brethren, they see those that really focus on the construction space. I know that they see this a lot, where some solicitations require minimum levels of bonding and insurance and some other things like that, and so which is comes at a cost. So if you're not prepared to sort of play at that level, then you might want to look at different ways to participate. Again, potentially as a sub. Next slide, please. Okay, so what I did was I pulled down as I was preparing for this workshop, I pulled down a few RFPs from some different agencies and entities, and the good news is the agencies soliciting pardon me, issuing the solicitations, they want you to succeed, and they want to be as clear as possible. So this was sort of an outline that came out of an RFP for the state of Texas. Now, this was a little bit on the large side, but I think was definitely representative of what you should expect to respond to as you go through your response effort. So we'll go through each one of these 7 categories on the following slides. So next slide, please. And what this was, this came from I think, can we go back one slide? Okay, good. So number 1 is overview and general information. And so this is oftentimes where they'll talk about kind of the goals and the objectives for the particular solicitation. They may lay out what their expectations are, prioritize expectations, maybe even provide an evaluation of the process, or when your documents show up, here's how we'll go about evaluating them and making our decision. Probably share a calendar of events just to make sure that you submit on a timely basis, and set the expectations so when you can hear a response back from the entity, and then they may even include some mandatory qualifications. So that'll often be included in the overview and general information section. Next slide, please. And so one of the important things that you can do is establish a response team. And even if you're a one-person show, I think it's very important that you think about responding in the context of a team. I've talked to a number of folks who originally started out as sort of solopreneurs operating by themselves, but they didn't let that be a hindrance in terms of reaching out to their communities and other professionals that they've met along the way to help them with their response. And so when you have a response team, the things you're looking at, this is a team of professionals that have skills in the various areas of the solicitation that maybe you don't have a deep expertise in, but some of the key subject matter expert areas that you want to focus on, it would be sort of things in the areas of project management, the technical design of the particular for the solicitation, cost analysis, the legal and compliance components, and which is also a section within this this framework or outline, and then how do you your quality assurance process, or how do you go about describing it? We all have a quality assurance process, some, but most are not documented. So here's an opportunity to make that happen. Next slide, please. And then again, before we start putting together pen to paper and start responding to the questions that are contained within the solicitation, it makes a lot of sense to create a proposal management plan so that you set you and your team up for success. So by creating a timeline, take the various assignments and or deliverables that are articulated in the solicitation and assign them to an individual or individuals that will be responsible for that part of the response to this solicitation. And then most importantly, establishing communication protocols. Maybe you've got a team of 2 or 3 people, and maybe you're spread out across the country, across the city, but maybe every Monday morning or Tuesday afternoon, you're going to have some sort of check-in meeting so we can share or describe the progress we're making towards the response to the solicitation. And so this is where the MBDA, Joni and I, and some of the other resources that we have access to can be a great resource to you as you go through this, because we can either help you think through some of the response elements and or point you to other parts of the SBA and or MBDA family that can assist you with that particular area. Next slide, please. And then, so again, I know you're just dying to get there and start answering those questions. Okay, I'm sorry, my screen just blanked out there. But before we do that, it makes a lot of sense to create that proposal outline for what it is that you're going to respond to. So we can make sure that everything that's been asked for in the solicitation, that you have a either a person's name and or a brief description about how what your response is going to look like. And then in that outline, make sure that you've got great organization, that you're using clear, concise language. Because I don't think anybody, so think about the people who are reading these. Let's say they have to read 30 or 40 of them to get to narrow it down to the top 3 or 4. If your proposal or your response just is not well put together, and you just keep wandering about before you get to the answer, you're gonna lose some style points there, and you may even get thrown out of the competition because again you chose to use too much flowery language that didn't mean much. Where what they're looking for is getting right to the point and describing what you're bringing to the table. And then most importantly, as we talked about earlier, you want to ensure that you are solving the problem that the agency has, and thus they're issuing this particular quotation or solicitation. Next slide, please. After we've done some sort of this foundational work, now it's time to start drafting the proposal. And then again, as many of these agencies have make it so straightforward that when you draft the proposal, just make sure that you're following the RFP requirements. So there'll be a fair number when they lay out the sort of the approach or the overview and the general information. They're going to tell you what you have to respond to, and then there'll be some areas perhaps that may be optional. So obviously, anything that's mandatory, there's no question about that. You'll definitely need to respond to that. And then again, here's just another reminder to use clear and concise language and avoid the jargon and acronyms that we often sort of incorporate into some of our words and our responses to these particular ideas. And then, of course, as the middle bullet there, make sure that your technical and management approaches are sound as it relates to those critical areas that are past performance, staffing, that sort of thing. And as you recall, a lot of these things will be at least mentioned in the capability statements that we created earlier in this workshop series. Next slide, please. So now we get to the review and edit. Just goes without saying that now that we've taken a first draft, and don't think that your first draft is going to be your final draft. We would think really hard that it may take you 2, 3, 4 different iterations to get to a product that is worthy of your enterprise and that looks like a winning proposal. So review and edit for accuracy, compliance, and persuasiveness. Yes, persuasiveness. This is a selling document. And we got to remember that when we're selling, we have to have an emotional component attached to this. People buy based on emotions, and then they justify that purchase based on logic after they've made the decision to move forward based on some sort of emotional. So to the extent that you can create persuasive emotional language in your response, the better. Conduct a technical review. And this is where it might make sense for you to go outside of your existing organization and find somebody maybe who has expertise in that particular technical area, or somebody who has extensive knowledge of the government contracting process. have them take a look at your final document or near final document and make sure that and ask them, does this look like a winning document? Is it clear? Is it concise? And does it lead to the logical conclusion that you are the best provider for this particular good or service? So yeah, those are really, really important things. Next slide, please. And then the last one is pricing the proposal. The proposal is price is always going to be very, very important, but I think it's sort of a myth to think that the low price always wins, and which is not the case. It may be in certain procurements, but in most it's not. What they're looking for is the best priced, most capable provider. So you may not be the cheapest, but you do have some strong technical abilities, capabilities, and that's what they're looking for. Make sure that all your costs are actually captured, and verify that pricing is in compliance with the RFP requirements. So some areas where you don't want, so in your effort to say, well, I want to provide a competitively priced bid, so I'm going to offer up some labor at a very, very low or discounted rate. Now, if the RFP says that you have to use a minimum rate of, let's just making this up, $15 an hour for certain labor categories, 18 for another, 25 for another, you're better served by not trying to undercut those stated. So again, pricing the proposal, absolutely, you want to be competitive, but you want to make sure that if there's any requirements set forth, i.e. minimum labor wages, that sort of thing, you want to make sure that you capture those. And then make sure you have built a cost model that supports what it is that you are proposing. As I was mentioning, in another life, I used to audit government contractors, and when in this particular agency that I supported, when the entity would propose a price, we would go in there and we would audit them to understand how they came up with that particular price. So we'd look at direct material costs, we would look at labor costs, we would look at overhead and that sort of thing. So I don't think that for some of these procurements that we're probably going after at this stage of the growth in our enterprises, we would be subject to that. But as you grow larger and become a more strategic provider to the governments, this may be something that you could ultimately be subject to. But the important thing is you want to make sure that you conduct a proper financial analysis so that you can make sure that you're able to make money at the price that you're proposed. Because we hear lots of stories that if not done properly or correctly, the volume that a government entity may give you could put you out of business rather quickly if you've mispriced your selling price to that particular entity. Next slide, please. And then our final one is we want to submit the proposal. So make sure that, of course, that it's on time, in the required format, and with all the necessary documentation. So there is no one universal way to submit a proposal. Some agencies still will require hard copies, and some may just accept them exclusively via some electronic format or medium. So whatever it is, make sure that you're aware of that. So when you read the solicitation at the very before you get started, make sure that that's something that you're looking for, because most times a late proposal will be the kiss of death for your response to the solicitation. And then one area that we didn't cover, which is absolutely very, very important, would be the scope of work. So in the general documents that in the solicitation that they will respond to you, the particular agency typically will spend a fair amount of time going through the scope of work. And the scope of work is essentially what is the requested service and or products that the agency is requesting, and then what are your responsibilities as a provider to deliver and respond to that. And then oftentimes they'll talk about some systems resources that they may provide, or maybe the systems that you as a provider will be expected to provide. So I think the key to the responding to an RFX is to extreme clarity around what's being asked to be delivered, and then our role or our job responsibility as respondents is to make sure that we give them all the information that they need. And then as we wrap up on the next slide please, just a quick recap. Read and understand the RFX, establish a response team, develop or promote proposal management plan so you know who's doing what and when, prepare the outline. So these are all things, kind of steps 1 through 4 are things that we do before we put, again, pen to paper in terms of our response. And then number 5 is a big one, draft the proposal. And this is an opportunity to go out and find or leverage resources that you have, or find additional resources, because there's no expectation that you're going to do all this work by yourself. You'll have a better product if you collect the expertise or genius of others that should be in your network. So you'll draft the proposal, review and edit, and then ultimately you'll submit the proposal. So that wraps up the formal part of our workshop here today. And so now we're going to open it up, and we're going to have questions from the audience. And Joni, you want to take the team through this?
All right. So as promised, just talking about our office hours. We do have office hours following this presentation on Wednesday, May the 17th from 1 to 2 p.m. And then on Monday, May 22nd from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. So if you could email myself and Austin, both of our email addresses are here. I did see in the chat that someone said they were emailing and they were bouncing back. Make sure, I know sometimes people don't see the period in between our names, and that is HCC with an S .edu. I know those are some mistakes that happen. If not, we definitely will be able to reach out via phone to try to help you if that's an option for you. We can schedule a one-on-one virtual meeting so you can learn more about the program and resources that we have. And of course, questions. We do ask you to come prepared with your questions, business plans, and capability statements if those are available as well.
Great. And then, so now we've got some time for questions and/or comments to what we've covered here today. So, Jessica, I'll flip it over to you to share what's in the chat room.
Yes. Austin, I have a question. Can you please give us an example of some of if in your auditing days, do you have any examples of when businesses were disqualified once they submitted their proposals? Can you give us some examples of that?
Yes, happy to. So we go back to the audit days, and we are talking about a little ancient history here. So give me a moment as I go back through the recesses of my memory. But oftentimes what we would let's say they were the respondent was talking about, let's say, some raw materials that went into their end product. And so, just a really common response we would ask for is, okay, show us the purchase orders that you had issued to acquire the raw materials, and then talk to us about when you put these raw materials into production, what was the yield from that? Because that's obviously a place where you can sort of hide costs is by overstating the scrap. And that sort of thing. And so when we also would do that, we look at sort of what the scrap was, and then which was also a sign of how efficient were they being in their processes. And then if it was a multi-year procurement, the expectation is that their efficiencies would rise over the years of that particular procurement, and then those increased efficiencies would be passed back to the government in terms of a lower price or at least maybe not increasing the prices. So we looked at sort of the entire, what we call the value chain of their manufacturing processes to ensure that the government was getting the best value.
Thank you for that. Here's a question here. How do you find prime contractors to partner with?
Okay, and I think we covered this in one of our earlier sessions, but there's a couple of ways. First, it would be, first you want to decide on what agency or that you want to work with, whether it be at a federal, state, local, or school district level. And then what I would do is find out who sort of oversees the issuing of the solicitations. So let's just say we'll just use the term generically, the contracting officer. They can be a great resource in helping educate you that if you're going to focus on this type of a solicitation, here are the primes that they maybe have worked for over time, over a period of time, and ask them to connect you, because the contracting officer has small business or needs to use certain certified businesses. They're going to be a great resource. Probably one of the other better ways to do that is when they have the pre-bid conferences, is to attend those, and then and treat them like almost like a chamber networking event. Try to get in there and meet as many people as you can. Have a brief elevator pitch and what it is you're looking for, and then ask that you're looking to meet people that will be primes on this particular solicitation. And through the whole concept of reciprocity, that's a great way for people to say, hey, you shouldn't be talking to me, but my colleague over here is the expert in that area and is a prime. You should speak with him. Joni, anything you'd want to add to that?
No, no, sir, I don't. I think you've done great.
Thank you, Ms. Hall.
Here's a question from Alicia Rains. It says here, may you share more information about what's to be included in a cost model and how a service-based business can put together an informed pricing structure for a RFP response?
So, and I think Alicia, we talked a little bit about this during our office hours. So, kudos to Alicia. She's took us up on the office hours, and I think we had a really good conversation. So so for your cost model, I think in a service business, the first thing you're going to do is sort of line out what are the various categories or levels of expertise that you will bring to bear in a response. Let's say maybe you have just making these up, you have a number of consultants, if I recall your business, and then maybe someone's operating as a lead, someone as a manager, someone as sort of just a senior consultant, and then maybe just a regular, kind of entry level or just consultant one. So what I would do is I would lay out the various roles that you would bring to a particular assignment, and then sort of lay out, what some of their expertise would be. Why is a manager different from a lead consultant? And then just, 2 or 3 bullet points on what the differences are. And then attached to each one of those categories, I would put a sort of a target labor rate. So not what you would charge the contracting agency, but what you would pay them. So let's say it's a managing consultant. I'm just making this up. Maybe you pay them $75 an hour, all the way down to a staff consultant that you might pay, $30 an hour to. So you would have their wages, and then you would apply an overhead rate to them. So what does it take to for the care and feeding of your business and of those consultants? And so the things that you include in that overhead rate would be things like their fringe benefits, the taxes that you have to pay to support them. Maybe if they're using office space, what is the allocation of the office space to that particular category of labor, so on and so forth. So when we would review, let's say, service type businesses, we would look at the base labor rate, we would look at the overhead application of the overhead, and then we would look at the elements that made up that overhead pool that they were allocating to the labor, and then we would look at total price. So it's just helping you to get very, very granular with your business, and even if, and I'll tell you, and even if that particular solicitation doesn't require that level of granularity in terms of we want to review that, it just makes great sense to become a better business for you to understand what that looks like in your environment, so that you can make better business decisions with the information that you've gathered for that situation. Alicia, does that help a little bit?
Well, Austin, just to piggyback on that, if you are submitting all of the allocations that you suggested,
Mm-hmm.
if that particular contract requires a renewal, would it be something as simple as just adding a cost of living to determine the cost for 2 years down the road? Or what else would you add to that model?
That's a great question, because oftentimes these contracts are fixed price for some period of time, and then there's an opportunity to go back and sort of reopen at least the cost components. So the first thing you want to make sure is, as you go into a subsequent year, has the scope of the project changed at all? And if it has changed, how so? And then, because the thing we want to make sure is, do we need to bring an additional level of, just picking on the service business right now, do we need to pull in an additional level of service, level of consultant to bear for this particular, now that the scope has changed a little bit. So the thing I don't like about, and I've done them both ways, where we've gone back and just said, hey, here's a cost of living adjustment that we make every year. That can be helpful. But if you think about where we are in our current business cycle, adding 3 or 4% a year to the base wage of my consultants, that's not going to cut it, right? Because people are walking across the street to get 15, 20, 30% sorts of kinds of raises, right, from our competitors. So the thing we need to do is we need to keep our eye on what's happening in the market, so that when we have a time to go back and revisit our billing, fee, payment structure, cost structure, we're armed with great intelligence, so we can go back to the contracting officer or who's ever making the decision and say, hey, look, I know we talked about a 4% cost of living, but basic inflation is now 9%. And more importantly, the competition for the labor that I'm bringing to bear on your solicitation, those wages have gone up by 30 or 40%. So I need some relief to help me help you and be successful in solving your issue or your pain. And so we need to talk about a substantial increase to the contract as it relates to the wages or what we're billing for the consulting fees. Yeah.
Thank you for that answer, Austin.
Thanks for the question. That was a great question.
Any other questions out there, folks? I don't see any additional questions.
Okay, well, great. On behalf of the MBDA Amplify, we thank you for for participating in today's session. And as Joni had mentioned, that we have office hours on Mondays and Wednesday, this coming Wednesday and Monday. And I will share with you that if you have some really unique situation as it relates to your business, these are the best time to get your questions answered, because it gives us the ability to focus on your specific business, as opposed to talk about general principles like we talked about here today. Joni, final comments, please.
Do, and I piggyback on what you say. Mr. Tenette and I, we have put together this information for you, and we really want to do you the service of being able to wrap it all up individually with you. We present as a group, but we want to help you manifest. We want to help you move forward. So if you would go ahead and make those office hours. They're harmless, they're virtual, and no question is a dumb question. Sometimes it's the question, the smartest answer you could get, you might already have. So let's just go ahead and visit with us. We would love to hear from you. We see you every other Monday here on your name. We see some names that are familiar, but we want to put faces with those names and definitely help if we can.
Great.
That will do it for me, Mr. Tenette.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Appreciate that. Okay. So I think is that the final slide, Jessica?
Yes. Yes,
Okay, well, great. All right. So we'll let you get back. Hope wishing everyone here a great week. And we'll, in a perfect world, we'll see you in the office hours. Thanks, everybody.